So first, a bit about Bright Green Partners, what we're doing. So like Geza already said, we are a top strategy boutique and we only focus on plant-based, cell-based and fermentation-based products with regards to mostly the food industry, but also to feed materials and specialties. And this differs us from other strategy consulting firms that have a wider scope. So we really want to focus on this part. Our clients are corporates and SMEs, but we also advise governments, for example, on cluster formation and investors. And like Geza already said, I have a deeper background in retailing, so I've worked in commercial roles there. So that's mostly the part where I advise on. Our presence is global, but we have the thought leadership team in Europe, so Copenhagen, Berlin, and in Amsterdam. But we have principals working all around the globe to cover the needs that we need to have on the projects. So our services are strategy development related. We also do innovation scouting with regards to startups. And we help, for example, on operational excellence. So actually, when the performance on plant-based or cell-based is already there. How we all do this is by combining resources like consulting backgrounds. So we all have consulting backgrounds and deep industry knowledge, because we believe that this is actually the key factor, not only being able to consult properly, but also having the industry knowledge to advise properly for this growing industry. And why are we all doing this? I'm trying to get to the next. Sorry about this. Seems that my laptop is a bit slow today. So we are here to help companies to actually flourish into this plant-based, cell-based and fermentation-based market. And that could be all across the value chain. Because we believe in a world where this is actually not only better for the planet and for animals and for your own health, but also a very beneficial industry to be in company-wise. And that's what we are doing with our strategy. So with regards to today, retail and consumer insights, I'm going to take you into the, I'm not sure what's happening, but I hope it works now. So I've prepared some things, what's happening in the industry with regards to retailing. And I will take you through how this industry actually expanded during the past year. So here you can see some examples of the plant-based meat category. And as you all know, it has expanded rapidly during the past years. So in the left picture, you see, for example, what I call the vegetarian corner, where no one wanted to be 10 years ago. The products weren't that nice. It was hard to find if products were already available and there. So that was the first entrance of vegetarian products during the past years. Luckily, nowadays, there's way more assortment, way more availability of products, more to choose for consumers. Because plant-based is booming at the moment. You see it everywhere. Every company is focusing on it. And that's luckily a good thing for retailing so that they can expand their range. So what you see is in the middle picture, you see vegetarian and vegan assortment in a major store in the Netherlands, where they really highlight having this range available because it's actually a USP for retailers at the moment and by attracting consumers based on this range. So it's often well positioned, but still it's not included into the actual animal-based meat category. So you still see that it's kind of related to the area where the meat and fish department is as well, but it's still separated. And in this case, flexitarians, for example, don't really see themselves as a vegan or think of eating vegan that night. So they don't really get attracted to going to that area. And in that sense, so some consumers still buy animal meat where they would be interested in buying vegan, but they don't think of it like when buying the groceries. So what you see in the future is that you will see more protein departments where you see a blurring combination of plant-based and animal-based, and perhaps also cell-based in the future. But that's something that isn't the case at the moment due to regulations in Europe at least. And you see that Kroger, a big retailer in the US, actually did a test this year where they tested with having plant-based products into the category of animal-based meat. So, for example, Beyond Meat and Impossible were there, integrated into the animal-based area to see what would happen if it would be in the same area, so that consumers could actually choose between two products, two burgers, whether they want to have a plant-based or animal-based at night. And you see this industry is already increasing, which I will show you some figures on later on, that even if you place it into this animal-based area, the increase expanded even more. So compared to the test areas, the test stores, and compared to the non-test stores, so where they just had the regular plant-based area, Kroger sold 23% more plant-based meat compared to the stores where they kept it in a separated area. So it's definitely beneficial to put it into the animal-based meat areas so that consumers can actually find it. Now, looking at what's actually in the shelf space, actually in the shelves of the retail stores, because if you want to have this growth, there of course needs to be assortment as well. Otherwise, if you just had the same players as 10 years ago, you would never be able to fill all these shelves with all these new products that consumers are looking at. So what you see is that it's actually going from vegetarian products only, because back then it was not necessarily labeled as vegan, but more as vegetarian. That was the trend by then. And being a niche category towards the main focus category for most retailers. I mean, if retailers want to position them at the moment, like vegan is really a USP. So you see here on the left picture, for example, Corn, one of the first players into this industry. And you see in the middle that brands like Beyond and Impossible are getting in, but also Unilever with the vegetarian butcher, and with Nestle with Garden Gourmet, for example. So really major brands are taking over. It's not a niche anymore. And now what you actually see in the more established countries based on the vegetarian and vegan market, so for example, the UK, the Netherlands, is that brands are actually not getting that much shelf space anymore, but that private label is taking over. So it's already going towards 40-50% of total shelf space that's actually reserved for private label of the retailers itself. And you could think as a brand that it's of course a threat because there's less shelf space, so it's harder to get in. But from a consumer perspective, this means that it's getting more affordable because of course private label comes often at a lower price point than the brands. So for the general availability, this is actually a good thing from my perspective. Well, like I already said, you really need new products to get into the shelves to also have this availability for consumers and to actually fill these shelves in the end. So what you see is that from 2017 to 2018, this market really took off. This is based on the Dutch market. So you see that from 2016, the increase really took off. And also if we look at the research from Bright Green Partners, we see that in 2016, a lot of startups established. So it also makes sense, of course, that in 2017, 2018, these products already got into the shelves. But also if you look at the past years, those were really the years, and 2019, of course, where the major brands stepped into this market as well. So based on the innovation and that this market is really getting the interest of actually all industry players, both from retail side as from food industry side, you see that this market is expanding. And it seems that the scrolling again doesn't really work. Very sorry for that. Okay, I will show you some examples of how this market works, and I find therefore Sweden very interesting because the category managers of Coop and ICA, they both saw also already last year that this market is really taking off, and it's not just like how they say a movement, but it's a trend. There's no way of stopping. People often ask me during the past months, during COVID-19, like, when there comes a crisis, do you think that this market is going to be stopped? I don't believe in it because it's rather a movement. People see that there's actually no way back because of health reasons, because of sustainability reasons, and because of animal welfare. And that's something that Corona, COVID-19 actually even more showed. So in 2019, Coop and ICA already said this is a movement, not a trend. And they came to this conclusion based on several tests they've done with, again, plant-based meat, vegetarian products into the meat shelves. They've run several tests, so blurring the plant-based meat into the animal-based meat, having separated vegan and vegetarian counters. They were not so sure about the exact way, but what we now see based on the Kroger example that I showed you, for example, is that actually having plant-based meat into the animal-based meat area seems to be the way to go forward. But what they did conclude based on these tests is that vegetarian, vegan products will actually be just as big as the chicken category in 2025. And for those who don't know, chicken has been the growth category in the meat section during the past years. It's about 10% of total sales, so it has a huge value. And actually in 2019, we saw the first decrease in chicken in the Netherlands. So that already says that consumer shifts are really changing, that this market is not such a growth market anymore, and that it's actually coming from the vegetarian vegan scene nowadays. And then if we look at the total meat sales worldwide, it used to be 1%. Now, I actually saw some recent data where after COVID-19, or where the situation we're still currently in, plant-based meat really got a push. And it's actually at 2% of meat sales worldwide nowadays. If you then look at other countries which are even a bit further behind, such as Sweden or the Netherlands or the UK, in the Netherlands, it already accounts for 5%, going towards 6% of total meat sales nowadays. So 5% was pre-Corona, and nowadays, with Corona taking into account, it's already about 6% of total meat sales. So it's already getting towards the chicken category. And I saw a very nice article this week from Germany, where one of the biggest plant-based meat players already outsold its animal-based meat products. So their total value of plant-based meat is already over their total amount of animal meat-based sales. Well, and like you all can imagine, is that COVID-19 is only increasing this part. So yes, there has been a lot of bulking going on, especially in the first weeks that you can see here on the graph. So March 28, it really took off in the States. And people started bulking. And not only with plant-based meat, also with fresh meat and all other products, especially the shelf-stable products. But what you can see is that consumers are really focusing on getting healthy food that is sustainable as well, because consumers are now really thinking, what am I actually eating? Where is it coming from? What influence does my food have on this planet? And you can definitely see the change in consumer preferences during COVID. So here, for example, March 28, you see that about 50% more sales, more in value was created for animal-based meat compared to last year, the same week. But if you then look at fresh plant-based meat, it's over 250% of changes in sales value. So you can see the difference. And still, yes, of course, if you compare the total value of plant-based meat versus animal-based meat, the animal-based meat area is much bigger, but it already says enough that consumers are actually looking into it that much. And I will try to scroll to the next page in the meantime. Okay, so why would it be beneficial to have plant-based products into your shelves? Next to having consumers that are actually looking into it, so they choose their retail store based on the products that are available there, because of course they want to eat healthy, sustainable, and with less animal welfare, or better animal welfare, but less animal harm, of course. So they are actively looking into these products. That's the first advantage, you get more customers in. The other advantage is that plant-based products are currently still sold at a premium. And that means higher margins. So if I look, for example, at the Netherlands, about 50% of margin is taken by the retailer. So it's actually a beneficial market to be in, especially if you look at the growth figures, of course. Then as well, you have less waste. Often these plant-based products have longer shelf life so compared to, for example, animal-based meat. So that means that you can store them longer, which in the end means less waste. Then as well, for example, plant-based milk, it's a shelf-stable product compared to the fresh animal-based milk, so you need less refrigeration. That differs, of course, when you have plant-based milk that is in the refrigerator section as well. And then finally, you have the case that plant-based shoppers spend more money on average. So 60% more than the average consumer. And that's data from 2017. So I have to say that it's probably a bit less nowadays, because also the availability is more there and affordability is better. Still, if you look at the data, 61% is very interesting to see as a retailer, as you often focus on the total value of the basket of your consumer. Now going towards what I think is interesting to focus on in the future. So the upcoming plant-based categories that we from Bright Green Partners see. First of all, we see that fish is really taking off, not necessarily in the retail stores, but mostly on the development part. So here you see an example of Good Catch, someone that's been here for quite some time now in the industry. But you see that battered fish, canned tuna, like several developments are happening in the industry. I also see that high-end fish could become promising, but there is no category built around that so far in the retail stores. And I would really think that if the availability is there from the product development side, then retailers can build upon this category as well, just like the meat. And at first it will start based on the plant-based meat category, but sooner than later, it will shift towards the fish category, where it also be blurred in. Then another development that we see is dairy products. An example, Violife, acquired by Upfield, a very big company into this field. So cheese, for example, plant-based cheese is something that consumers are really demanding, and then there aren't many options so far. So that will really take off in the upcoming years, especially if you see how big the animal-based cheese market is. Next to that, you have smaller examples like whipped cream, sour cream, etc., etc., and of course ice cream. You see already big players like Magnum, Ben & Jerry's into that field. Also some startups that do have interesting products. So this would be another major category that could be interesting. And the reason why I actually created this block, the black box around these categories, is that fish and dairy, such as just like plant-based meat, are based for the major part on animal-based products. So you would actually have to start from scratch to create a plant-based product. That's not the case with veganizing products, because there you start with, for example, a cookie, and only 10% or maybe even 1% is animal-based, for example, the butter or egg, whatever. So it's way easier to actually come up with a final product, because you only have to replace those areas. And I really believe that this is something that retailers could also start with, by actually checking what's currently in your assortment and how easily it can be replaced with a plant-based vegan ingredient, so that you can attract more consumers and also communicate, of course, so that more consumers will find you and will really see you as the leader on plant-based products. And that's something what we see in all major companies actually. So I'm trying to get to the final slides. Nowadays, we see that already 40% of the major food firms in the world have dedicated teams that focus on developing plant-based products. And that counts for both multinational that actually produce and brand products, but also retail-wise. And I'm wondering if there are any listeners here today from the industry or from the retail side, whether you have a plant-based manager or even a dedicated department focusing on plant-based products and innovations. Happy to hear your thoughts and to take any questions. Thank you.
Awesome, that was amazing. Floor, I think you can see the Q&A down there.
Yeah, I'll open it. In terms of labeling, do consumers consider placing plant and meat under the same label as misleading? Well, of course, you mentioned on the packaging that it's a plant-based or an animal-based product. So that also counts for nowadays, if you sell products in animal-based shelves, it could be based on chicken, could be based on pork, it could be based on cow's meat, so beef. There you also highlight what kind of ingredient you use. And this is the same, for example, for plant-based products. So you could mention it's based on soy or it's just a plant-based burger. So in that sense, it won't be misleading, of course. Hope this answers your question. Otherwise, let me know. We may get to this question. If you don't, though, I would be interested in understanding how sticky are consumers after trialing or preparation turn to purchase. Actually, my colleague Garrett also mentioned some parts of it. So it depends on taste and on price. Most consumers actually return to the plant-based area because at first it feels like a big step to go into this area. That's why often consumers also don't feel them attracted to the vegan area because they don't define themselves as being a vegan. When they actually first tried, then oftentimes they do come for a second and a third return shopping trip. But that, of course, depends on the experience they had. So I really hope that this industry will maintain to create valuable products and really great taste and great pricing experience so that consumers actually get this good experience and feel like, okay, this is something that I could eat more often. Because, of course, the perception of consumers is often, when they haven't tried plant-based so far, that it's less than the animal-based product. Question by Ali. 2012 was a low year of innovative meat substitute. Did projects exit the market? Why so? Would it repeat? And thank you for the presentation. Well, happy to give the presentation, Ali. I think if you look at the market at first, it wasn't the consumer demand wasn't there that much. It was still a niche, vegetarian, vegan, hippie-ish atmosphere that was around it. If I, for example, speak for myself, I've been a vegetarian since I was 12. And people often thought, okay, this is weird, hippie-ish. Nowadays, it's cool to be vegan, to be a flexitarian, vegan, flexi-vegan, whatever. So the whole consumer perspective changed. And that's also why the innovation is increasing, of course. Other companies see that this market is actually beneficial to be in and not just a niche anymore, but you can actually make money out of it. So that, of course, increases the innovation pipeline. An anonymous attendee on question something. Is the sales data comparing plant-based and animal meat sales skewed due to the fact that meat was not reaching stores in order to be bought? Yeah, that's a good question. It's something that should be taken into account when comparing the data from COVID-19. So indeed, people were bulking up. It could be the case that meat wasn't there, and that therefore plant-based sales increased. That's a conclusion you could draw. On the other hand, we do see, I've seen data that consumers are really looking into what they are eating at the moment, and that they are, that due to COVID-19, they really think twice before they buy something and are actually willing to change their eating habits and already doing so. So yes, I do believe that there's a portion of consumers that had to buy plant-based meat because there was no availability of animal-based meat. But most of those consumers were actively seeking for other options. And don't forget that those consumers that had to buy plant-based meat because there was no availability of animal-based meat now have tried it, even though they were not really interested in it, and will buy it for another time if they really had a good experience. So that wouldn't be a bad thing either if it was the case that they had to buy this. A question from Jeff. Any trend in preference of source of plant-based protein? Pea, soy, etc. I think if you look at the products at the moment, it's of course often based on soy and wheat, and of course pea based is also really taking off. So there's the infrastructure already, but this market is going to expand so rapidly, and we need a lot of protein sources. It wouldn't be sustainable if we would only have soy or only have wheat or only have pea. So we need fermentation-based proteins. We need perhaps cell-based in the future, maybe insects even. It could be algae, it could be seaweed, it could be everything. And for every ingredient, there's another function as well. So what kind of taste do you want to create? Do you want to create a meat substitute, or do you want to create cheese or fish? There's an ingredient that's suitable for another product. Also, you often look at bulk ingredients, so that's like the main ingredient in your product, but you need precision ingredients as well. Nowadays, some products aren't vegan but vegetarian because of the binding and emulsification, and that's then often done by egg white. But we will need egg white replaces as well in the future, and that's something where, for example, fermentation could step in, or Rubisco ingredients. So you see a lot of sources that are needed.